Hi Stitchers, welcome to Tatreez Talk, where we share conversations about Palestinian embroidery. I'm Lena, here with my co-host Amani, chatting with talented embroiderers and artists, sharing their stories, inspirations, and the cultural significance behind their work.
On today's episode, we are chatting with Tasha, NADIA, Matar, a Palestinian Polish registered social worker and therapist currently completing graduate school in art psychotherapy and writing her thesis on how to survive the genocide as a Palestinian therapist as a resource for other therapists. We are so excited to have you here. Tasha, welcome to Tatreez Talk. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hello, I am so honored to be here.
So Tasha, as a fellow half-C, half-Palestinian, I'd love to hear more. I know our listeners would love to hear more about you and your family's connection to Palestine.
Yeah, so I grew up as a diaspora kid, very disconnected from my identity, the typical story of my dad telling certain people were Jordanian, Palestinian, and others that were fully Palestinian. And I also grew up surrounded by, well, not surrounded because we're scattered around the world, but I have some really strong aunties, 4 of them across the world that we would have family reunions. And one of my aunts, she is chair at SOAS and is just a very big academic. So from a young age, I was enamored by her bookshelves and I started learning everything there is to know. So I always kind of like delved into my history, even though it wasn't necessarily taught to me. But yeah, there were points in time where I hid my identity, silenced my identity. I was in very white art spaces, white-dominated art spaces. And so I remember like when I was a musical theater geek at one point, a Tasha phase. That's the white in me.
Embrace it.
Embrace it, yeah. It was a moment. I auditioned for this youth collective, and on my first day there, I heard them not whisper, they said it pretty loud, the word terrorist, and I was like, oh, Oof. Where are these? Wow. How do they know each other? And they were referring to Palestinians, and it turned out they all went to the same like Hebrew school, and
Oof.
You know, nothing wrong with that except for when they teach you Zionism. Mm-hmm. And so I really quickly hid my identity in art spaces specifically. So I've been really reflecting on that since my journey through art therapy, and how I learned really young that being Palestinian wouldn't help me achieve in the arts, you know? Mm-hmm. And so in certain spaces I hid it, and I always had that privilege of hiding it and kind of using it when it, when my whiteness afforded me the privilege to advocate in other spaces, you know? So I think that's where my mixed identity comes in. In terms of my Polish side, my mom is not so happy about how estranged I am from it. But my mom has a lot of trauma on her side. So I think it's a very complicated relationship. And maybe my mom and I are both trying to reconnect to it. But because there's a lot of like interpersonal trauma on that side, it's really hard to.
This might be a loaded question, but have you thought about reconnecting to your Polish side through embroidery? Because there's also a rich history of embroidery in that part of the world too.
Yeah, a really good question. Actually, before this genocide, I was starting a series because I was doing a lot of mixed media canvas pieces, infusing Tatreez into it. And I was making these. I actually have them in the room with me, but I guess this is all audio, so you can't see them. But I was making these mirroring pieces, and most of my pieces are self-portraits, where I would make my 2 sides dialogue through embroidery, because there is folk embroidery in the Polish folk traditions. So I was trying to connect with that, and then this happened, and I was like, okay, I'm going full Palestinian again because I need to. That part of me is threatened, right?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it was really part of my, personal goals to integrate all parts of my identity, and it's just taken a pause.
That makes sense. It'll come back when the right time is right. And also maybe this is another loaded question, but when did you get to this point, and how did you get to the point of feeling comfortable to own your Palestinian identity, especially in these art spaces that are typically not very Palestinian friendly?
Yeah, I don't know if there was a specific day and time I can trace it back to, but I do know when I had this very spiritual like awakening. And I think from a lot of people I've spoken to, it was in 2021 for a lot of us, because for the first time, we were confronted with the visual reality on social media going viral of, for the first time, our people's brutality being shown on social media. And now we're seeing it on a way larger scale. And it was both, like right now, it was both empowering, and it was like, okay, I can be a spokesperson, but it was also like ripping apart my insides. And during that period, I didn't really have a map for how to deal with that. And so that 10 days of that escalation, I stopped sleeping completely. It was a really strange experience. And then on the 9th night, I finally collapsed, like, as your body does when you don't sleep. And I had such vivid dreams. I had this dream that I was like almost like a bird hovering over this frozen wave. Like the wave was just frozen, and there were all these martyrs walking out of the wave, and they were just like marching back to their lands. And I woke up to the news of a ceasefire, and it was just the wildest thing ever. It really made me feel like at the time I had never visited our homelands, but I saw everything. Like I saw the entire land in my dream, and I was like, whoa, I had been there without being there. And from that point on, I was like, okay, I have like an ancestral connection here. I have a land-based connection, and my body remembers it. So I need to keep following this. Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Shivers.
We're all like,
And we're like, ooh, let's reflect on that. I think that that resonates. Like it very much resonates.
Sorry, you asked to talk to a therapist with an
no, I love it.
Imagination.
This is why we wanted you here. Shifting gears a little bit, can you then go into telling us a little bit about your personal Tatreez journey? Yeah,
so that I got really lucky with. A few months later, there were workshops being hosted in Toronto by a young artist. Her name's NADIA, and she was teaching the community, just as our traditions have for generations, Tatreez, and she was doing it in parks. And I decided, why don't I go meet some other Palestinians and make some art in the park? And I started going to as many as I could. She did this group exhibition called All in Your Head series. And I was really inspired. I started having a lot of visions for making like mixed media pieces. And so I started my own practice of connecting to, because at the time I still hadn't visited. My family was, I just feel like there was a lot of fear in my family around going back, even though we have citizenship elsewhere and have family back there. But I had only ever met my aunts. Actually, my aunt's name is Lena. And I had only ever met her on like phone calls and heard of her, but never in real life. So I was just connecting through my senses. I decided to make a piece for like taste, smell, sound. Like the young art therapist in me was just exploring that. And I was choosing patterns that related to those senses. And and from there, it just became this addiction. Like,
the addiction. Yes.
That happens.
the addiction.
Familiar.
We're very familiar.
It's a healthy addiction. Oh,
for sure. Can you tell us a little bit more about the 5 senses? Like, I'm trying to visualize it. What do you mean by motifs for each of the senses?
So, for example, there's a motif called eyes wide open. I'm not sure what it translates to in Arabic. Someone listening. Okay, yes, that makes sense. I understand Arabic, but I don't speak. And that one, I imagined it in different ways, like keeping my eyes open to all that's happening in the homelands. Not like in this moment specifically, not closing my eyes to go back to comforts and sitting with the discomfort because we need to keep our eyes open. And also just imagining as I was creating it, what I would see if I was there. Like literally just imagining what kinds of landscapes I would see or through collective stories I've been told in my family. And then, I went from that to doing one with more like tactile. And this one's like breaking open a pomegranate heart. And just... sometimes it's hard to explain my pieces, but I think that one at the time, and they change over time. It's more of a visual thing, but over time, the meaning of my pieces and what I take away from them. And also I see this in like my art therapy clients, like they'll come back weeks later and be like, oh, I didn't see something in my piece that like I see now. And I think that's just a natural part of making art, that it changes as you change with time. And this one, though, like each pomegranate had like represented a martyr, and how I feel all the like every single one like that. They're not just numbers. And really, just connecting to like that one was more touch and like heart and
it's so interesting to hear you describe it, because for me, when I think about like, because you're talking about basically storytelling through this medium, but like from my perspective, and I think this is because you're a therapist, I don't know, that's my assumption. From my like when I think about storytelling through Tatreez, for me it's more like, oh, I have like this story that I want to tell, and then it just kind of happens. But I haven't like returned back to my pieces and like intentionally thought through, what do I see in them? Like that's what's interesting about the way that you're framing it. And now I'm like really curious to go back to all my pieces and just like do a little bit of a reflection and just like look at them and really observe them and just think, what do I see now in this, like knowing who I am and how I've evolved since I've made this piece? Like, what do I see in these designs, and what is it telling me about myself that maybe I didn't catch beforehand? It's just really the words you use and the way you use them is just so fascinating to me.
I think especially with your thob, like looking back at your thob now, because you started it and by the time you finished it was years, and now you have this time from being finished to wearing it multiple times. Like that'd be really interesting. Follow-up episode.
I want to see that. I'm also curious, like as a mixed Palestinian, because in a lot of my pieces I see like these colors being like woven together and like different shades. Like I did this olive tree at one point, and it was just like the trunk was like these woven shades of brown or like tan, and for me, it was like, I just saw so much of like that mixedness and like being kind of like, am I enough of this? Am I enough of that? Am I, you know? And I just saw it right away. But it's a dangerous thing being an art therapist, because like I can't make art with my friends' kids, because I'm like, I'm going to turn this into therapy, and that is not ethical.
That's too funny. Okay, so don't show you my art. No, just kidding.
Well, actually, we're not supposed to, and I don't analyze other people's art. Like what you were saying, Lena, is true. Like you would look back at your tobe and analyze it. I wouldn't do that because I don't know the meaning you associate with it, right? So it's like any other form of therapy. It's all I can't like read a mind. I'm not a psychic.
Yeah.
You know? So it's the meaning you associate.
Well, so before we dive into Tatreez from a therapist's perspective, I'm curious, like, what does Tatreez mean to you? How do you attach meaning to your embroidery?
Yeah, I think there's so many different elements of it. There's identity, of course, like historically it's been, and presently it's used to mark different identity markers. It's used for celebrations. It's used for grief. It's used for resistance. It's used to mark age, gender, all sorts of like your region. Then on a more like somatic level, I've also recently connected to it more as like a practice of mindfulness, and that like it literally regulates your breathing as you're doing it by just, you know, like that very meditative stitch. It's it's impossible for your breath not to slow down while doing it. So I don't think I invented this, but you know, it's just like a natural thing that we've done for generations. But like I've noticed that I breathe in on the overstitch and then I breathe out, and then I try to make it more rhythmic. Like if I notice that I'm like holding my breath, I'm like, okay, like let it flow. And yeah, it's something that I've done with clients, and it's definitely therapeutic. It's also like one thing I've thought about recently is how impatient I get. And I started thinking about it in the context of liberation and like steadfastness, and how big the pieces I would see my like family members making back home, they're huge. I'm like, I could never. That would take me like my entire life. Like I'd be a teta by the time it's done. But
that's what I do.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm pretty slow with it. So
Same, girl, same.
yeah,
Don't
just
worry.
slow Tatreez club. Yeah. So just thinking about it in terms of like steadfastness, the patience it takes, that liberation's not a sprint, it's a marathon.
Yes.
And really taking time with that. Yeah. Yeah. I think it also applies to grief, like, and the way that I practice therapy, like, it's, you know, the back of Tatreez pieces aren't always the neatest. Like, not everyone's are super neat. And
Not everyone is like you, Amani. Not everyone.
I'm obsessive, which also probably tells you a lot about my personality and my issues.
Well, this isn't a therapy session. So
We'll talk about it later. We'll talk about it later. Lena likes to drag me.
I do. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, that's what friends do.
Right.
Especially our
Just
friends.
okay, go. Exactly. Right. Going back to, so it's interesting that you talked about the breathing, the regulated breathing as you stitch. It's not the first time we've heard it, or the fact that, you know, it is just very therapeutic in general, the motions of Tatreez. So these are all things we've talked about. I've said it myself too. Like, it's so great to help manage like anxiety and stress. But obviously we have not talked to someone like yourself, an actual like art therapist candidate. So we'd love to hear kind of from your perspective, if you can break down really like the power of Tatreez as therapy.
Yeah. I mean, there have been like if you want to talk about it in a very like, it's been studied way. There definitely have been like studies done on it. I don't know about like somatically as like a somatic practice, but I think if we're talking about like trauma, and generational trauma, which is like a big tenet of my practice, I think by weaving, like you're weaving like little pathways to your ancestors through the practice, and also healing trauma. There are 3 basic steps of it, and it's not that cut and dry, like they're more fluid than that, but the first step is remembering and like honoring the memories. So by taking these patterns that have been there for generations and generations, and mark geographies and mark so many different parts of our identities, our rich identities, we're engaging in an act of remembering. And that's literally like, the first step of trauma healing. And then it's like mourning. And there are also pieces that honor grief, or like resistance, and like intifada pieces, you know? So you can also go through that step of trauma healing. And then the third step is usually reconnection or social action. So a lot of people, like if we're talking about like survivors of sexual abuse or domestic violence, like often they, when they're empowered from their trauma, they gravitate towards like feminism. And so in the same way, for Palestinians, it's usually the last step of it is reconnecting through activism. And so through creating Tatreez, it's a form of resistance, right? And it's a form of like preserving our lineage. So yeah, I just see it like it fits literally every part of therapy.
Yeah. So can you break down also a little bit about like what exactly is art therapy, and what exactly is the, I guess, because I've had a conversation with other mental health experts, and they always talk about how when you enter this world from like a technical perspective, the theories and the like these steps and all of this content is created from a very Western mindset. And so I'm curious about, you know, also like Tatreez is a very unique in the sense that it wasn't the thing that was used to develop these theories, right? It's like it fits very nicely, but it's not necessarily what developed these theories. So I'm curious about like what is art therapy, and also, you know, how do we think about how the West practices, or how we think about therapy and think about these spaces, and like I guess how it conflicts with like our tradition and our culture.
Yeah, I love this question. I think about this every single day, and I have a new thought and theory on it every single day. But yeah, art therapy, at least where I am, is, well, in a lot of places actually now, it's a regulated form of psychotherapy. So it is born out of Western psychotherapy practices, and it combines the creative process with psychodynamic theory usually. So it's a very eclectic approach. But to me, art therapy is inherently decolonial because it connects us to our ancestral practices, whether it's expressive arts like music, drumming, the body. Like I do a lot of nonverbal sensory motor informed therapy. So it's kind of communicating, even if there's a language barrier with someone, like without having to use verbal language. And and like I've spoken about a lot in this episode, like embroidery is a form of that. And I think also another way, like in a gendered way, that art therapy decolonizes is that like these art forms, like textiles, have been predominantly women-based art practices, and they've been devalued in the world too because of like European fine arts, colonialism, all that. And so like reclaiming it is also like reclaiming our Palestinian feminism, like you know, which is so often like destroyed in the West and villainized or demonized as like being the oppressed like Muslim woman. So yeah, that's a bit of a tangent, but
We like tangents here.
Yes,
Sorry.
we love tangents.
Back to art therapy though, like what is my role as an art therapist? I think my role is to bridge, to allow for integration of both sides of the brain. So often when someone's experienced a trauma, it happens in the right side of the brain. So that's where the brain stores trauma and also visual language or creativity. And my job is to synthesize both sides of the brain so that we can verbalize and metabolize that trauma and support clients to facilitate expression. Often people don't have the words, especially with grief. There's like no words for it. And a lot of people right now I'm hearing saying, there's no words. I don't have the words, or I don't even want to talk, you know? And also through that like integration, I'm touching on different forms of therapy. So one I use a lot is DBT, and I'm also seeing a lot of mixed Palestinians right now because we've been so scattered around the world. Like a lot of people have different lineages. And so DBT is kind of this, like a philosophy of dialectics, which helps us integrate our opposites. Or like for me, like I'm seemingly a contradiction. I'm Polish Palestinian. To a lot of people, it's like, how did your parents meet? And so something that's always been like a point of contention for me is like, how can these two exist together? How can I exist? It's already hard enough to exist as a Palestinian, you know? So it touches on like DBT, integrating opposites, and often that's done through someone depicting two different things and trying to find an intervention for how they can merge or like transform them in some way. And through that we imagine different futures. Like I'm doing a lot of like Palestinian futurism through it, which I think is what people need right now to imagine some kind of liberated future.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit more about that? The Palestinian futurism that you're exploring?
Yeah, I've used it mostly as a meditation practice with clients. Like I'll just pause and be like, okay, let's just ground ourselves. And I've done like 5 senses, Free Palestine meditation with people, you know, kind of imagining what you would smell, see, taste, feel if you're in a liberated Palestine. I've done, I've done a lot of like visualizations with people of like drawing what a free Palestine would look like. I've done a lot of like eco art therapy as a field too, which is connecting with land. So some people will have like olive trees in their home in a pot or something, and then just using the leaves from the tree to make some art, or use actually drawing a tree and imagining like what their roots are. Maybe the trunk's like an ancestor. Most people will draw their teta. They're pretty special. So,
they really are.
So that's a few things I'll do. And trees, they live for such a long time and they have different life cycles. And a lot of people have also brought up that I really like that people know this. I thought it was something I discovered when I went home. But when the Zionists first settled, they brought a bunch of European trees. So they brought pine and like cedar trees, and they planted them. And I don't know if you know this, do you?
They never survived.
So they never survive. Yeah, they just burn down because they don't belong there. And it's a testament to like who's native.
But the land knows.
Yeah,
the land knows.
The land knows. The land remembers. Yeah, it seriously keeps a track record. But yeah, so a lot of people have been connecting to things like that and depicting like the olive tree that will live forever, or like, and so that's what I kind of see as this futurism of like Palestine will never die because the land never dies.
So how do you include Tatreez in these sessions? Do you include Tatreez as part of the art therapy sessions?
Only if someone brings it themselves. Like I do have a few who are, but as an approach, I would use it more in workshops with like a big group. I think it lends itself well to that. But with starting therapy with someone, I think it's, in art therapy, there's like using different mediums. You have to be pretty safe with how you use mediums. And I think Tatreez is a very controlled medium. So it's a very, like there's fluid mediums and then there's controlled mediums. And for some people, I think it can be really helpful to feel that sense of control, especially right now when so much is out of our control.
Yes.
But for others who are more exploring their fluidity and identities, I feel like it's very like restrictive, actually. So I don't
that's so interesting.
normally start with it.
It's funny you say that because I resonate with that in the sense that I love the fact that Tatreez is very controlled and very like it's this way, and there is a map, if you will, of what the pattern will look like. I cannot do like free flowing art. I try, but it drives me crazy.
Yep.
And for some people that can be such a source of comfort.
Yeah, there is comfort in the uniformity of it all.
Are you also someone that will like cook the same meal a million times?
Yes.
I thought so.
Wow. Do you feel attacked, Imani?
I mean, I walked into it. Listen, I am self-aware. I know I'm crazy. I'm okay with it. I like my kind of crazy.
Listen, all Palestinian women are crazy. No one is marrying us.
I'm okay with it. I'm okay with it. This is who I am.
So funny. I love it. I love
Embrace
it. I love it.
Oh, 100%. So, okay, if someone was interested in exploring art therapy, because I actually, like, after this conversation, I'm like, maybe I should look into art therapy. But if someone is interested in exploring art therapy, how do you recommend they go about finding someone? I know it's different for every state, every country, but is there kind of an easy general way or things that people should look for when they're looking for an art therapist?
Well, yeah, if you're talking about like everyone has different things they're looking for when they're looking for a therapist, right? Like, do you want someone with the same identity as you? Do you want someone, nowadays people are like looking for someone that shares the same queer identity or the same religious identity too. Some people want a Muslim therapist. So I think there's like a flavor for everyone. And I think that you can search through your country's art therapy college or like art therapy association. So in Canada, for example, it's CATA, so Canadian Art Therapy Association. And then you can look at different art therapists. You can look them up on Psychology Today if they have a page there. Okay. Yeah, and I do want to make people aware that some people advertise as art therapists and it is a protected title. So always like check if they do have an education in it, because it is like it's its own form of psychotherapy, and a lot of therapists think it's just like you can slap it on as a modality when you have to have formal training in it, just like any other form of therapy.
That's a really good call out, and kind of ties to a question that I wanted to ask you, which is, could you distinguish between therapy and mindfulness? Because that's something that I'm actually not super well versed in, but I know that there is a very big distinction between the two. So I'd love to hear from you, just like, how do you think about those two terms and what they mean for your own just actions, I guess.
Well, mindfulness is rooted in really long traditions of like Buddhism or like, like Tibetan Buddhism. And there, there's like Western mindfulness, which is infused into therapy often. But also some people go and have teachers or mentors for years. Mindfulness, there's apps for it. I think, as an applied form in therapy, and to facilitate therapy, someone has to have the knowledge of psychodynamic practices. So really how to hold someone's, not only like therapists also don't only hold a session, but also document the session to honor someone's story. It's technically like a healthcare profession. So mindfulness itself I guess I'd compare it to the act of art making versus having an art therapist, right? Like art making itself is therapeutic and anyone can make art. And there's a reason why so many people make art when they've experienced trauma and they get super into it,
Yeah.
But then the difference with having an art therapist is that the art therapist can facilitate a space where you can metabolize your trauma. And that can hold that with safety and help you stay in a safe zone so that, you don't become a risk to yourself or something doesn't come up that you can't contain. And so in a similar way, I guess mindfulness is usually safe. Like I wouldn't say it's like unsafe. But yeah, it's just not facilitated to customize to someone's trauma or whatever kinds of issues they're coming to therapy with. Yeah.
Oh, thank you for that. Yeah, it's I feel like there's a distinction that needs to be clarified for a lot of people. Like, is it accurate to say, because you use the word therapeutic, which also applies to just like our daily practice, but like to me, I don't know is that considered therapy? Like, can you say it's therapy, or is that just like slang? I don't know if there's like
Yeah. I mean, I joke like that all the time, like that I just did like retail therapy or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And Maddie smiled.
I'm not going to come hunt you down if you say you did therapy. Like, yeah, I think it's it's colloquial. Like it's, people talk about therapy all the time, and it's super common now to go to therapy. There's a bunch of Insta therapy, which I think people should also be cautious with. But yeah, I like before I became an art therapist, I have like 10 years of doing art-based facilitation at different, like I was kind of freelancing at different centers because it was something I was really into. But the whole time my parents advised me not to, like, as a child of immigrant parents, they actually created a group chat with me when they first found out I wanted to study art therapy and sent me, I don't know if my dad's in tech, so he knows how to create websites and stuff. So I'm still like, were you sneaky and made these websites yourself? But he would send me like the top 10 worst jobs. And art therapist would always be at the top of the list. First? Yeah, I was like, my God. A little hard to believe like that this is coming up first every single time. He's like, if you want to be poor for the rest of your life and ruin our family legacy of making it out of Palestine, we came here dramatic. So you can be an engineer. Oh yeah, of course. Engineer or doctor, nothing less. But yeah, I would call my workshops therapeutic art before I became an art therapist because that's what I was legally allowed to do.
Okay. Oh, so now you're not legally allowed to say that?
Well, now I say like I'm practicing art therapy because I'm practicing art therapy.
Got it. Okay.
Now you can say
pending
more.
Thesis. Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
So, okay, you're an artist in your own right. And you talked a little bit about some of the art that you were working on, which, by the way, you have to send us pictures. We'd love to see it. But right now, can you share with us like any of your personal Tatreez related projects that you might be working on? Or if you, kind of want to share a little bit more about the projects that you were referencing earlier.
Yeah, I started one from the website Tatreez and Tea that they put out on a PDF. It is nowhere near complete. I have like one corner of it done, and then I keep having like I've had a lot of art ideas during this genocide, and I've been kind of art journaling every day, and so I'll start a project and not finish it, and then start a new one and not finish it, and so I'll come back to this one someday, but that's the only one I'm working on right now. I just kind of took a pattern, and it's Hendala flying over the wall. The October 7th
Yeah.
I love that one.
Yeah.
Lena finished that one. It's really pretty.
Oh, nice. How long did it take you?
Well, I'm crazy, okay?
Yeah, she's fast. She's not a slow stitcher like us. She's fast.
I am crazy, and I'm also one of those. Like Amani is, she's obsessive with her backs. I'm obsessive with like my productivity, which is I should probably go to therapy for. Like I get this idea, and I have like I put a self-imposed deadline. I don't know why. There's literally no one asking for this except for me. And I have to make that deadline. And so if I have like, anyways, I definitely worked on that one very quickly for no reason other than I'm crazy as well. We're all crazy basically on this podcast.
It's a little different types of crazy.
Exactly. Different shades of crazy.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I need to borrow some of that productivity and meeting deadlines right now, especially. I feel like time doesn't exist. So
Wish.
Oh man. Okay, so thinking more about just your own practice with Tatreez and seeing it in action with maybe some of your clients, what are some of the biggest life lessons that Tatreez has given you, or maybe something that you wish you knew when you were first trying it out?
Okay. Something I wish I knew. Yeah, I honestly now I'm just thinking about how fast you finish pieces, and
Oh my God, no, remove that.
I started when I was younger so that I could be like trained, It's like when I started, I got into rock climbing at one point, and I was like, I wish I started this when I was a kid so I'd be a monkey. Like I feel that way about the things.
Yep.
I wish my teta taught me, and I was doing it with her, because then I'd be so fast by now if I had like, I'm not going to age myself, but if I had about 30 years.
Yeah. Oh, girl, you're fine. I mean, for what it's worth, I have this I'm like, I wish I was doing Tatreez since I was 7, because then I would have had like 8 different athwab to wear.
Yeah. I know,
like
right?
a child prodigy. Yeah.
Oh, it's a terrible mindset. Terrible. We are perfectly where we're supposed to be. We're right on time.
Yes,
I've been trying to focus that in more. It's really important.
Embrace it.
Yeah.
Embrace it.
Everything has its right time. Yeah. Okay. That wouldn't be my real one then. Honestly, the only thing I regret is not getting the embroidery thread and the Ida cloth when I was in Palestine. I wish I got some there, because I want some from a souk. Yeah, that's it.
Oh, well,
For your next trip.
We didn't talk about this. So you did end up going to Palestine, because you mentioned that you hadn't gone. How was that trip?
Yeah, after all that like imagining, I was like, okay, I need to see if it's actually compatible with what I imagined. Yeah, so my journey there was kind of interesting, because I got injected with even more fear. So I I have an aunt in London, and I had a layover there, and she was like, oh my gosh, you're gonna have to be really careful. Like, I swear you're gonna go to like a protest and get shot.
Oh my God.
Yes, I will, Auntie, but I'm not gonna tell you about it. I'm gonna block you on the day of. But yeah, so on my way there, I was like, oh, what am I doing? And then, I do have my dad's cousin there. And so she was like, Habibti, it's fine. Like, just come stay with us. And I also have an aunt in Jordan, and she dropped me off at the border. And my trip there was so, like, it just felt like I came home. Like, I guess every Palestinian probably says that if they're lucky enough to go. I know it's privilege. Like, I kind of feel guilty about talking about it every time I do, because I know it's so many people's dream. And yeah, I don't even know where to begin with, like, the friends I made. I lived in Ida camp for a month, and that summer I volunteered doing kind of art therapy-esque things at an art-based center for resistance. And I also stayed with my aunts, who are like, I felt like I finally met the family that doesn't make me feel crazy. Like, that is like, oh, you're exactly the kind of crazy we need to be. And like, they're not going to put you in a psych ward here, you know, because everyone's like this. Yeah. And my aunts there are like, they studied psychology. They're professors in psychology. Yeah. They write books on political violence and psychology. And so obviously I devoured their books. And we just had so much to talk about, and especially about how emotionally removed my family is here, and a piece I felt I had always been missing, like that affection. And I love my dad so much, but I'm like, I felt like they were connected because they stayed on the land, you know? And so they were like connected to their hearts and their families, and in ways that we're kind of stripped of when we come to the West.
Yeah, when you're scattered in the diaspora, it becomes a lot harder to have that connection.
Yeah. Yeah, so it felt like coming home. Yeah.
Oh, I'm so glad you had that experience. I am somebody who has not been to Palestine yet, but I do love hearing, especially people who did not go regularly every summer, you know, when they were younger, like people who went later in life. I love hearing those stories. It just like pumps me up for when I get it together and get there myself. But I'm glad that you had that experience. It sounds really beautiful.
That's amazing.
Yeah, if you want someone to cross the border with, I'll go with you.
We'll make it happen, girl.
Tasha, it was such a pleasure to have you. Before we go, please share all of the places that people can find you. And if there's anything else that you want to share, of course, like please let us know.
Yeah, so I primarily use my Instagram right now, which is the.humanitarian.therapist. I really want to change it to the Intifada therapist, but I think it'll get shut down. So I'm keeping it as this cringe name tricky. That I started with. Yeah. So that's where, and then in there's a link tree. There are links to book a session. It's pretty easy to book. And if you have trouble, you could just email. There's also email in clients. There.
Do you take clients for like globally, or do you need to be Canadian?
Yeah. Right now I'm serving in Ontario. I'm a registered social worker here. I do hope to register elsewhere. But my organization is also pretty global. So there are like situations where we can, and with the free therapy for Palestinians, because I'm still offering art therapy as a student, it's possible sometimes. So, yeah, if it's really your dream to get therapy with me, then reach out and we'll find a way I can register in a different state or province. Usually it's just like an appeal to that college of, anyways, that's on my end to do that. You don't need to hear my whole letter of appeal. But and then other than that, I have a website that needs construction, and that's pretty much where you can find me.
That's
Amazing.
awesome. Well, why doesn't your dad help you with that website?
Yeah.
If he's creating like worst 10 careers, he should be able to revive yours.
No, he keeps being like, because he just quit his job actually, and he like wants to start something to support Palestinians, and I'm like, support me, Dad.
Hello,
Yeah, you're like,
exactly.
I'm Palestinian, support me. I have the Palestinian you can support, thank you.
But he's like, no, I had to struggle. You have to struggle too.
No, we don't need that. We don't need that. We don't need the struggle train.
No, we don't need that energy.
Trying to get off.
Like, yeah. Isn't that why you brought me here? Like,
exactly.
Tasha, thank you so much for joining us. This was such a pleasure.
Yeah, this was great.
yeah.
And I know our listeners have been wanting to hear about this more from like a therapist perspective. So really, really, really appreciate your insight. Thank you for the time.
Yeah. It was
Thank you
so
for
much
being
fun.
here.
My cheeks hurt from laughing.
Good. We like that. That's the energy we're trying to bring.
You know, Tatreez is a tool for healing, and just managing anxiety and stress comes up over and over and over again on this podcast. And such a pleasure to bring someone who has that background in like from an educational perspective, how to use art as therapy, like what that means. So I'm so happy we got to just like pick her brain on what do these words actually mean, and is it like true? Is Tatreez proven to be a source of healing, a source of mindfulness? And I mean, our guts were all correct. Our ancestors were all like, they just knew. And this is what they turn to in times of, stress and anxiety and just distress in general. And I just love it so much. This art form is just always just every time we have a conversation, I'm just like, this is pure magic.
Yeah, I know. I really liked how she was talking about the way that like the physical act of Tatreez, for example, like as you're stitching, it regulates your breathing. And that's not the first time we've heard that or talked about that on the podcast. And again, it's not something that I thought about until it was named. And I was like, oh yeah, that's actually right. Cause I always say that I have a hard time meditating because I can't just like sit there and like zone out, but I can when I'm stitching. Like I can just sit there and I zone out on what I'm stitching or the project I'm working on. And that's just like my form of meditation. I also had to laugh when she was talking about controlled art versus fluid art.
Oh my, okay, no, and that makes so much, okay, I didn't say it in the moment, but I'm just like you. Like I can't do any of that free form stuff. No. Like I have, like my husband can go and just do pottery and just do it. And I need a plan. I need a structure. I need a grid.
I know.
That I follow. I need a pattern.
I know.
So
I know.
That was really validating.
That's why I always say with waste canvas, this is why waste canvas is one of my enemies, because it's not, the grid is not as controlled as I need it to be.
I know.
She was totally ready to analyze me and my crazy obsessiveness. Like, I was about to call myself out way too hard. But no, it was great. It was really informative, and honestly, we just had so much fun with her, and just couldn't stop laughing and giggling. So I know we'll have to have her on again. I'm sure that people have questions. So yeah, actually, like if you listen to this episode and you have questions for Tasha, let us know. We would love to have her back and kind of talk more. I feel like we could have continued just talking for hours and hours. It's almost endless. And I really want to see her art. I'm dying to see have her show us the pictures.
We will link everything in the show notes, you guys, as well. So anything that we reference, we will make sure to have links for them in the show notes. And yeah, just as always, another fantastic conversation all about the thing that we love most.
Yes, thank you so much for listening to Tatreez Talk. Of course, we want to hear about your Tatreez journeys. So be sure to share your stories with us at tatreeztalk@gmail.com, and we might have you on an upcoming episode. Do not forget to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite listening platform, and be sure to leave a 5-star review. You can follow me at Min Amani and Lena at Lena Stob, and follow the pod at Tatreez Talk. We will talk to you soon.